So this, because of moving out of potassium, it increases the positive potential here, which leads to the entry of magnesium and calciums back into the interstitium. But if your patient is on loop diuretics, the sodium entry will be blocked here. As a result, the potassium won't come out. The positive potential is not created, and the magnesium and calcium is not absorbed, rather it is excreted out. So that can lead to hypomagnesemia and hypocalcemia. But with thiazides, you noted it causes hypercalcemia. So this is what the difference is. So increase in calcium and magnesium excretion takes place because of abolition of transepithelial potential difference, which drives the reabsorption of divalent cations. But since it is inhibited, so the excretion takes place. So these are the adverse effects: hypokalemia and loop diuretics. They compete with uric acid. That's the reason it leads to hyperuricemia. Bumetide is more potent. It causes rapid diuresis, more lipid soluble, better bioavailability. Now, another important thing is that IV furosemide cause brisk diuresis. Also, it increases the systemic venous capacitance because of the release of prostaglandin. That is another reason why it is prescribed in acute left ventricular failure leading to pulmonary edema. So one thing is it will cause brisk diuresis. Second thing is the vasodilation will lead to the shift of pulmonary fluid to the systemic circulation. So that is again the reason why furosemide can be given up to 100 milligram. Multiple will be given if the pulmonary edema is not relieved. Next group is the potassium sparing diuretic. So we have amiloride and spironolactone here. So their mechanism is they simply inhibit these epithelial sodium channels present in the late distal tubule. As a result, the entry of sodium is not possible and this exchange won't take place, the potassium won't move out. So that will lead to decrease incidence of hyperkalemia. Rather, they will spare the potassium. So that's why they are called potassium sparing. Spironolactone is a aldosterone antagonist. So it is a competitive inhibitor. It will act on this receptor and inhibit. As a result, the sodium entry won't take place. Now, at the same time, what happens in the intercalated cells? The negative potential out here can lead to the secretion of hydrogen ions. But if this negative potential is disturbed, which happens with these potassium sparing diuretics, this hydrogen ion won't be secreted out, rather it will accumulate in the circulation and can cause acidosis. This will be more clear in your diuretic lectures. I don't want to spend more time here because we have got another drugs to be discussed also. Right. So we know that the luminal membrane of late distal tubule collecting the cell express this renal epithelial sodium channels. This is all fine. So amiloride blocks this channel. We have discussed this. Inhibit the potassium excretion. Intercalated cells, yes, they have an ATP driven hydrogen pump which secretes the hydrogen ions. So this pump is facilitated by the lumen negative potential. So these drugs like amiloride, what they do is by reducing the negative potential, decrease the hydrogen, which can predispose to acidosis. Because the potassium is not coming out, right? Which normally happens. So that's why the bit of relatively negative potential is there, right? So we have these two drugs. The doses are, they are very weak diuretics. They are not used for producing the diuresis. Rather, they are only used along with thiazides or loop diuretic to prevent the potassium loss. That is the only reason. You won't use any potassium sparing diuretic exclusively to produce the diuresis. No, they are only used as an add-on drug either with thiazide or with loop diuretics to prevent the potassium loss, which is the main adverse effect of all diuretics, right? We have a brand name called lesilectone. That is a combination of furosemide and spironolactone. That's why it is called lesilectone. So it is usually given in a patients of cardiac failure. So these drugs are less efficacious, only used as add-on drug with thiazide and loop diuretics to prevent hypokalemia. And spironolactone can produce dangerous hyperkalemia if prescribed along with ACE inhibitor. We discussed in the last lecture that ACE inhibitors have the potential to cause hyperkalemia, and if the patient is on spironolactone or any other potassium sparing diuretic, chances of hyperkalemia are very high. So this combination is avoided. Plus, spironolactone has anti-androgenic side effects. So the patient may develop gynecomastia or erectile dysfunction. So nowadays we have this new drug of the same class, eplerenone, which has got less anti-androgenic issues. So this drug is being replaced. Spironolactone is being replaced by eplerenone because of its less anti-androgenic property. Okay, in 2002, a trial was completed which was known as ALLARD trial, and this trial, what the investigators did, they compared four drugs: chlorthalidone, which is a diuretic; amlodipine, which is a calcium channel blocker; lisinopril is an ACE inhibitor; doxazosin is an alpha blocker. So diuretic, ACE inhibitor, calcium channel blocker, and an alpha blocker. They were given into four different groups, right? So what is the full form of ALAT? Anti-hypertensive and lipid lowering treatment to prevent heart attack. So it started in 1994 and concluded in March 2002. So around 5 years or so. So around 40,000 patients were enrolled. They were divided into four groups, approximately 10,000 in each. And these four drugs were given to check out their effect or their anti-hypertensive potential, that any of these is better than the other or not, and what are their effect on the mortality. So can you guess, कुछ ऐसा निकल के आया होगा कि any particular drug is better than other drug? So what was seen that alpha blocker doxazosin, that particular arm was stopped in between. The reason was because in that arm or in that group, 25% higher rate of cardiovascular disorder and a high risk of heart failure was seen as compared to the diuretic arm or diuretic group. So the alpha blockers, that is a reason, are not the first line treatment. They are out because over a period of time, they bound to cause the water accumulation, which can lead to the cardiac disorders and all. Right. So they can lead to the tachycardia also. So this hypotension definitely. So these particular group of drugs like alpha blockers are not considered as first line treatment. It was also seen that the diuretic group had slightly better BP control, which was 1 millimeter lower than amlodipine. So this 1 or 2 millimeter actually is not statistically significant. It does not matter. So what we can say that there is no difference between the all the four treatment groups. The BP was controlled by all the four drugs, but with the alpha blockers, we got an adverse effects. That's the reason they are out. So rest of the three drugs are in. So thiazide type diuretics were superior in preventing one or major form of cardiovascular disease, and they are less expensive also. So it was concluded that they should be preferred for first line drug, right? It happened in 2002. So still we are doing the same thing. Diuretics are the first line treatment. If they are indicated, definitely they are being prescribed. And now we have ACE inhibitors and CCBs also. Okay, so other group of drug which we use for the control of hypertension are sympatholytics, जहाँ पे आपके most important group is the beta blockers, alpha blockers, the mixed. Can you name a mixed alpha and beta blocker? जल्दी से लिखो. A mixed alpha and beta blocker. Labetalol. Propranolol. Yes. Clonidine क्यों लिखा भाई? Labetalol is okay. Fine. Okay. So the role of beta blocker, as I earlier said, they are not the first line treatment, but they are very effective in treatment of the hypertension. What are the reasons they are not the first line? We will talk about it. So they are effective in the treatment of hypertension, but not the first line. But they are the first line of therapy in these cases. Myocardial infarction, ischemic heart disease, congestive heart failure, and arrhythmia. So अगर patient को hypertension है, along with that he has ischemic heart disease, then beta blockers become the first line of treatment. But if the patient has got just hypertension without ischemic heart disease, they are not the first line treatment. The reason in ischemic heart disease, they have shown to decrease the mortality. At the same time, they will decrease the blood pressure also. So what they do is they decrease the workload of the heart. They will cause bradycardia, reduce the work, so less of oxygen is required. Heart will be able to, since it's already compromised, it will be able to function properly. So that's why beta blockers are indicated in ischemic heart disease or coronary artery disease. They are less effective in African Americans, again the same RAS thing. So the beta blockers which have intrinsic sympathomimetic activity, drugs like pindolol, they will cause less of bradycardia and less of decrease in cardiac output. Also, they can cause vasodilatation by stimulating the beta 2 receptors. As a result, there will be less fatigue and less dyslipidemic changes. Atenolol, which is a selective beta blocker, was found to be less effective in decreasing the risk of stroke or cardiovascular complication. It was also shown that this particular drug may not lower the aortic blood pressure as effectively as compared to the other drugs. So beta blockers are not the first line drugs. Mechanism, you all know, decrease the contractility of heart, decrease the heart rate, decrease the renin by blocking the beta 1 receptor on the juxtaglomerular cells, blockade of beta receptors in the brain stem and of prejunctional receptors inhibit the release of neurotransmitter. So the beta 2 receptor which are present presynaptically, they are stimulatory in nature. So if you blockade of beta receptor in the brainstem and of prejunctional beta receptors in the periphery inhibits the release of neurotransmitters and decreases the sympathetic nervous system activity. That is all okay. So the presynaptic beta receptors usually are stimulatory. So if you block them, the release of norepinephrine will also be decreased. You know that most of the presynaptic receptors are inhibitory in nature. There are few exceptions. So the beta one is out of which is a stimulatory in nature. Okay. So what you see on your screen are the various beta blockers. Just I want to highlight some points. The first group is the classical ones, which are non-selective beta blockers. जिसको हम first generation भी कहते हैं. So here you have pindolol, which has a intrinsic sympathomimetic activity. you have propranolol, then you have timolol. Where we use timolol nowadays? Where we use timolol? Glaucoma, very right. Very right. Then the second group, which is beta 1 selective group. Here we have atenolol, bisoprolol, esmolol, and metoprolol. Now, please remember this drug esmolol is given intravenously. It is again given in hypertensive emergency or in myocardial infarction. Rest of the drugs can be given orally. So nowadays, the drug which is widely being prescribed is this metoprolol. Betaloc के नाम से आती है. The brand name is Betaloc. So this is widely being prescribed in ischemic heart disease also, as well as congestive heart failure. So it is a selective beta blocker. Then we have another group which has got some additional actions. Non-selective beta blockers with additional action and beta 1 selective with additional actions. So in the non-selective, we have carvedilol and labetalol. Both act on alpha and beta receptor. That's why they are non-selectivity. And where we prescribe these drugs, carvedilol is given for the treatment of again ischemic heart disease. The important point about this drug is that it has got additional antioxidant property, which is usually not seen with most of the beta blockers, but it has that. So that gives this drug an edge over other for the treatment of congestive heart failure, where remodeling can be the issue. Labetalol, it blocks both alpha and beta. So what are the additional actions? That it can be given in pregnancy-induced hypertension. Very right. Yeah, somebody has written that also. It is not that lipid soluble, so can't cross placenta much also. So this drug is very much indicated. Now the selective beta blockers with additional actions, we have nebivolol, pitaxolol. So they have vasodilatory property. And why they have a vasodilatory property? There are various mechanisms. Some beta blockers, they release nitric oxide. So they cause vasodilatation. Some of them, they stimulate the they block the alpha receptors also. That will lead to vasodilatation. Some of them blocks the calcium channel. That again leads to vasodilatation. So we will discuss those drugs with the additional vasodilatory property. You should remember their names at least. So this is a group of drugs which have the additional vasodilatory property. So the drugs which work by increasing the nitric oxide production is celiprolol, nebivolol, right? So इसका फिर क्या advantage क्या है? Advantage could be, let's say, if you have to prescribe beta blocker to a young sexually active male, right? So you know that beta blockers, if prescribed over a period of time, can lead to loss of libido and all. So this group of drugs can be prescribed to such population. Second thing is the beta blockers which stimulate the beta 2 receptors, which are present in blood vessels, that can lead to vasodilatation. So in this we have celiprolol, cartilol. Then the beta blockers which has got additional alpha receptor antagonism property. Here we have carvedilol, labetalol also. The important ones I'm highlighting. Then the beta blockers which also blocks the calcium channel. Again we have carvedilol here along with bitaxolol, which opens the potassium channel, telazolol. So what you see out here is carvedilol is quite an important drug. So is labetalol. Additional property of carvedilol is antioxidant. We have discussed it. So please try to remember the which beta blockers work by increasing the nitric oxide, which works by blocking the calcium channels, and alpha blockers and all. Now comes the problems with beta blockers, that why they are not the first line. Dyslipidemia is seen, but please remember dyslipidemia is mainly with the non-selective beta blockers, not with the selective. So non-selective beta blockers which have no intrinsic sympathomimetic activity can cause dyslipidemia. Then they can't be given into the patients who have, they can't be given to the patients who have asthma or COPD, because non-selective ones, they can block the beta 2 receptors in the bronchial muscle, which are responsible for causing the bronchodilation. Second thing or third thing is they increase the risk of hypoglycemia in patients on insulin, but it's again seen with the non-selective beta blockers. Hypoglycemic awareness is also decreased. What are the signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia? Like tremors, tachycardia, nervousness. But if the patient is on beta blockers, they will be masked. So the one won't be able to know the patient is getting into hypoglycemia, and adequate treatment should be given. And sudden discontinuation of the beta blockers can lead to rebound hypertension simply because there is upregulation of the beta receptors. So that can again a problem with beta blockers. And it has also been observed if you increase the dose of a selective beta blocker, their selectivity to block the beta 1 is lost. At high doses, they can block the beta 2 also. So at high doses, the selective beta blockers, they lost their selectivity. That is again a problem with this group of drugs. And if given in combination with calcium channel blockers, nodal blockade can have. But that will only be with verapamil and diltiazem, because these two drugs are cardiodepressant. So if the patient is already on these two drugs and for some reason you have prescribed a beta blocker, so AV block can happen. So this combination is usually avoided. Fatigue, loss of libido, and decrease in quality of life is again a problem. There can be some kind of initiation of depression also over a period of time in the patients who take beta blocker. But the most important thing is it has been reflected in many studies that they have an inferior efficacy in primary prevention of MI and stroke. That is a most important reason that they are no more considered as a first line drug in the treatment of hypertension. But if the compelling indication like ischemic heart disease is there, they become the first line of therapy. Please remember that. So they block tremors because beta 2 receptors are present on skeletal muscles. So non-selective ones can block tremors. They also inhibit catecholamine induced mast cell deregulation. This is the usual things. Propranolol आपने NS वगैरह में पढ़ा होगा, so I won't go into the detail. It is a non-selective beta blocker which has a good lipid solubility. Half-life is around 4 hours. So it is used for the treatment, can be used, but nowadays since we have got selective, so we don't use these drugs. In arrhythmias and prophylaxis of migraine, yes, it is still being prescribed. Digitalis induced tachyarrhythmias and tremors, we can go for this drug. Off-label uses in the variceal bleeding of the portal hypertension. There again we can use it. And generalized anxiety disorder. So अब जो propranolol का indication है वो mainly है in thyrotoxicosis cases. Number 2 is prophylaxis of migraine and in some tremors. Otherwise, it is not being used. Here is a comparison of nadolol and pindolol. Pindolol has got intrinsic sympathomimetic activity, low lipid solubility. So it is preferred in patients with limited cardiac rhythm or who have bradycardia. There safely we can prescribe because they won't let the bradycardia happen. Metoprolol is the most important drug which is prescribed nowadays, but it is avoided if the patient has got heart rate less than 45 and if the systolic BP is less than 100 millimeters of mercury, then this particular drug is avoided. Atenolol is hydrophilic, less CNS penetration, but in renal dysfunction, we have to adjust its dose. Asmolol, as we discussed, is an injectable one. Half-life is just 8 minutes. It is a very important drug. uses this during surgery to prevent tachycardia and supraventricular tachycardia and MI to prevent the arrhythmias. This particular, since it is available in the injectable form, so this is being used, and half-life is very less. So the titration can be achieved easily. Bisoprolol is very selective, more selective than metoprolol and other drugs. Half-life is around, indications are same. Okay, the important point about carvedilol is its antioxidant property. It is lipophilic. No need to just note down it. Remember the important points only. That no dose adjustment is required in mild to moderate renal failure. Plus, it scavenge the reactive oxygen species and protect the cell membrane from lipid peroxidation. This is all the antioxidant property. So it is being used for the treatment of hypertension, congestive heart failure, left ventricular dysfunction, and also in dissecting aorta aneurysm. Labetalol, it is a racemic mixture of 4 isomers, right? But it has got partial agonist activity on beta 2 also. Beta blockade is 5 to 10 times more than alpha blockade. But it has got poor lipid solubility. So that is the reason that it is indicated in pregnancy-induced hypertension, as it will lead to little placental transfer. Also in hypertensive emergency, injectively this kind of drug can be given. Nebivolol, the important point is the nitric oxide vasodilatation. This drug also has got some antioxidant property. It is lipophilic, so less fatigue with no sexual dysfunction is seen with this drug. So can be safely given to the younger population. Coming to the alpha blockers, you know that they are divided into two categories, selective and non-selective. In selective, we have selective alpha-1 blockers like prazosin, teradoxazosine. Alpha-2 में yohimbine है, irreversible में phentolamine, phenoxyphysine. चलो आप जल्दी से बताओ where we use these drugs, phentolamine and phenoxybenzamine. Are they used in some disorder? Pheochromocytoma, Sheetal. Yes, and also she said, yes, we use them in pheochromocytoma. And where we use these alpha blockers, selective ones, prazosin, terazosin, dexazosine. BPH, yeah, benign hypertrophy of prostate, very right. That's the reason they are used here, exactly. So what they do is they decrease the arterial resistance, increase the venous capacitance. So the chances of increased renin are high. Long-term use may vasodilatation persists, but heart rate, cardiac output, renin comes to normal level. Do cause postural hypotension. This is a problem with this group of drugs. Increased chance of heart failure on the long-term use. So it is not recommended as monotherapy, used in conjunction either with diuretics or beta blockers. So the indication is hypertension and BPH, but not the first line therapy. So these drugs are not used. But if the patient has got pheochromocytoma, definitely we have to give. These are the treatment of choice. Okay, it's just a comparison of selective alpha blockers, prazosin, terazosin, doxazosine. The only point out here is they are all indicated in benign hypertrophy of prostate. The half-life is maximum of doxazosine, right? So more or less their dosing is same. They decrease preload and TPR. Terazosin, important point is it induces apoptosis in prostate smooth muscle. Same is the story with doxazosine. So once daily they are given. That is the only indication. So if the patient has got prostate hypertrophy and he is hypertensive also, so they can be given. Tamsulosin and silodosin, they are selective alpha 1A blockers. Phenoxybenzene and phentolamine, they are irreversible blockers. We have discussed it. They are used in pheochromocytoma. But the problem with these drugs is they can cause tachycardia, which can lead to arrhythmia, plus postural hypotension, nasal stuffiness, and inhibition of ejaculation. So these are the main issues with the non-selective alpha blockers. So they are used in pheochromocytoma. Right. Why beta blockers should not be given without alpha blockade in cases of pheochromocytoma? Sanjeev is asking, is tamsulosin used as a BP tablet? What exactly you mean by it? For the control of blood pressure, you mean? Okay. It can cause hypertension due to alpha action. All right. Shashwat has written that. Very high vasoconstriction. Yes. Okay. So beta blockers should not be given without alpha blockade, because if you give a beta blocker, it is going to block both the beta 1 and beta 2. And what will happen? The catecholamines, which are being released by the tumor, they are going to act on the alpha receptors. So profound vasoconstriction will take place that will cause excessive rise in the BP. So that is the reason. And usually this question also is asked in theory exams. So what are the adverse effects of alpha blockers? Palpitation, postural hypotension, nasal blockade, diarrhea, fluid retention, inhibition of ejaculation. So these are the issues. That's why they are not that popular drugs. Among the centrally acting hypertensive, चलो दो चार नाम बताओ. Centrally acting sympatholytics. Clonidine, very good. Sheetal and Shashwat have written clonidine, Chitil, Remat, right. Methyl dopa, again Sheetal, very right. Where we use methyl dopa? Methyl dopa, where we used? Parkinsonism में L dopa use करते हैं प्रहा. Pregnancy, yes. Pregnancy induced hypertension, yes. So what are the alternatives in pregnancy induced hypertension? We have Ansh and Akshara has written pregnancy. Yeah. So in pregnancy induced hypertension, we have labetalol and methyl dopa, two important group of drugs which are used. So okay, coming back to these drugs, clonidine का mechanism आपको मालूम है, it is a alpha 2 agonist. So that means the alpha 2 receptor which is present presynaptically, and you know that it is inhibitory in nature. So you are stimulating that by giving an agonist, you are stimulating the alpha 2 receptor. So inhibition will be more strong. As a result, the release of noradrenaline won't take place. That is the reason for its sympatholytic activity. Another point is it is a imidazoline receptor agonist. Initially, it was used as a nasal decongestant. Later, it was found to decrease the blood pressure also, to suppress the outflow of sympathetic discharge. So there are three types of imidazoline receptor, I1, 2, and 3. So clonidine stimulates I1, which is responsible for inhibiting enzyme in catecholin synthesis. It has been seen in some in vitro studies. So that is another reason how clonidine decreases the blood pressure. But the most important is because of this alpha 2 agonist activity, which is present in the presynaptic. Now let's say if we give clonidine intravenously, what can happen to the blood pressure? It will increase or decrease with why? Clonidine, if given through the IV route, what will happen to the blood pressure? Yeah. Ashwath has written it can cause hypertension due to peripheral alpha action. Very right. So the alpha receptor which are present peripherally, it is going to act on that and that will lead to vasoconstriction. So it can cause hypertension. So another property of clonidine is it increases the vagal tone, right? So as a result, what will happen? The heart rate will decrease. So when the clonidine is given intravenously, there is increase in blood pressure because of activation of peripheral postsynaptic alpha 2 receptors. What are the various adverse effects? Sedation, depression, dry mouth, postural hypotension, sexual dysfunction, missed dose, you can get rebound hypertension. और किसके साथ ये प्रॉब्लम था रिबाउंड हाइपरटेंशन का अदर देन क्लोनिडीन? Which group of drugs can cause rebound hypertension? Beta blockers, yes. So what are the uses of clonidine? It is used for the treatment of hypertension, but not as a monotherapy, not a first-line drug. Also, it is used in attention deficit hyperactivity. Off-label uses. Off-label means not recommended. But in the practice, the clinicians have observed they are helpful in withdrawal from narcotics because what happens in withdrawal, there is excess of sympathetic activity like tremors and all that. So that can be suppressed if you give a sympatholytic. Anti-anxiety, yes, it can be used. Otherwise, what is usually given in the withdrawals? Any idea in alcohol withdrawals or other kind of withdrawals? What is the group of drug which is the treatment of choice? Naloxone. It is an antagonist. We are not talking of we are talking of withdrawal, not de-addiction or something. It's a benzodiazepines. Just for your information, the diazepam group of drugs, benzodiazepines, they are offered to the patients who have the problem of alcohol withdrawal and all. Again, the same reason. Okay. Methyl dopa, its mechanism is same as that of clonidine. It is a centrally acting prodrug, gets converted into methyl norepinephrine, which is going to act on this alpha 2 receptor, and the release of noradrenaline will be decreased. So it is stored in the vesicle, substituting noradrenaline itself. So it's this form methyl norepinephrine acts on the alpha 2 receptor presynaptically, alpha methyl norepinephrine. So methyl dopa getting converted into alpha methyl norepinephrine by this enzyme dopamine beta hydroxylase, and this will act on the presynaptic alpha 2. As a result, noradrenaline release will be decreased. The adverse effects are sedation, depression, xerostomia, hyperprolactemia, headache. But it is a treatment of choice in pregnancy-induced hypertension. Dose is around 250 milligram twice daily. Okay, we have discussed this thing. Reserpine तो कब से ये obsolete drug है? Any idea how it acts? What is the mechanism of reserpine? It was extracted from a Indian plant called Sarp Gandha. Was used for centuries in India. But फिर बाद में बंद कर VMAT2 inhibitor, very right, prevent release. Yes, here it acts. It blocks the VMAT, irreversibly block the uptake of norepinephrine and dopamine into synaptic vesicle by inhibiting VMAT. Very right. But problem क्या था इसके साथ? Suicidal tendencies and depression. That is the reason this drug was totally stopped. So just for information, you should know that. Otherwise, it is not indicated. Okay. I will go through it fast. There are various type of calcium channels. But here L because it is long lasting, T because it's transient, and so on. So these T types are mainly indicated in the genesis of epilepsy, and L type have mainly present in the vascular smooth muscle. So our concern is with this particular group for the treatment of hypertension. So it blocks the calcium channel. They are divided into two groups, dihydropyridines and non-dihydropyridines. Right. So in dihydropyridines, we have nifedipine, amlodipine, phalodipine, and clevidipine. This particular group comes under dihydropyridines, and then non-dihydropyridines, you have diltiazem and verapamil. So what is the basic difference in functioning? The basic difference is that this particular group acts on the vasculature. Main effect is on vasculature. They have a vasodilatory property, whereas these two drugs, they are cardiodepressant. They have an effect on vasculature also, but vein action is on heart. So that is a difference. So why this difference is important? Let's say you are sitting in an OPD, a patient comes, two patients come, one has got a hypertension, other has got angina. And you have to prescribe CCB only. So in a case of hypertension, which CCB will you prefer? And in the case of angina, which CCB will you prefer? Yes. So in case of hypertension, Sheetal has written that we will prefer dihydropyridines. And in case of angina, Prakhar says 2 and 3, that is diltiazem and verapamil. Very right. So let's try to understand the difference. Now here what you see on your screen is a comparison of various parameters like vasodilatation, depression of cardiac contractility, depression of automaticity, depression of conduction at AV node, and they have given a scoring. 5 is the maximum score. So they are comparing nifedipine, diltiazem, and verapamil. So what was observed that nifedipine has the profound vasodilator activity, and score of 5 was given as compared to verapamil and diltiazem. As far as the depression of cardiac contractility is concerned, verapamil has the maximum score. Depression of automaticity is concerned, here again diltiazem and verapamil. AV conductance, again diltiazem and verapamil. So they don't have, nifedipine has no effect on the depression of conduction as well as depression of automaticity. Hardly any effect. So that is a reason that this particular group of drug is indicated for the treatment of hypertension, because they mainly act on the vasculature, and these two drugs are indicated for the treatment of angina. Let's say a patient has got hypertension and angina also. In that case, diltiazem or verapamil will only be prescribed. We won't go for nifedipine or dihydropyridines. No, because diltiazem, verapamil will take care of the cardiac part also and vasculature also. But there are some issues with nifedipine. We will discuss it later. So we have discussed it, that dihydropyridines are selective vasodilators. Non-dihydropyridines, they are equipotent for cardiac tissue as well as vasculature. So peripheral vasodilatation because of dihydropyridines, heart rate moderating, reduced inotropism is with non-dihydropyridines. I won't go into the mechanism. It is all clear that entry of calcium through L-type calcium channel lead to, you know that. I won't go into the detail. Okay. Now, the problem with nifedipine is it can cause vasodilation, which can lead to the reflex tachycardia. This is the biggest problem and can precipitate angina. So, if this drug is being prescribed, the prescriber has to be very careful, number one, that the patient does not have a ischemic heart disease, right? Or they have to prescribe a beta blocker along with nifedipine. to take care of reflex tachycardia. So that's why this drug is not popular at all. So amlodipine, the other drug, is being prescribed for the treatment of hypertension. And the reason is amlodipine has got a very long half-life. Its absorption from the GIT is slow. Hence, the chances of reflex tachycardia are less with amlodipine. So amlodipine is preferred, not nifedipine, for the treatment of hypertension. Nifedipine is only indicated in eclampsia or pre-eclampsia basically. There it is prescribed in pre-eclampsia, sublingually they give it. Otherwise, for the treatment of hypertension, amlodipine is used. So amlodipine has got slow absorption. Look at the half-life, 35 to 50 hours. So less tachycardia due to long half-life as there is less peak and troughs. Trough is the lowest level of the drug. Right? So that is the reason amlodipine is indicated. Felodipine has got greater vascular specificity more than that of amlodipine. It can also be prescribed. Nicardipine has got anti-anginal property because it has got selective action for coronary vessels. Istradipine has got vasodilatory property, also inhibit the effect on SA node, but without changing the heart rate. Important thing about nimodipine is highly lipid soluble, so it is a treatment of choice for patients who have got cerebral vasospasm. वहां पे हम nimodipine देते हैं. And if we use sustained release preparations of calcium, just dihydropyridamines, the chances of reflex tachycardia are less. So what are the adverse effects of these drugs? Nifedipine can cause headache because of the vasodilatation, flushing. Peripheral edema is quite commonly seen with CCBs. It's mainly because the precapillary dilatation happens because of the reflex post-capillary constriction. So hydrostatic pressure बढ़ जाएगा, that can lead to ankle edema. So ankle edema is a very important adverse effect of CCB. It can lead to the gastroesophageal reflux disease because sphincter tone, lower esophageal sphincter tone कम हो जाता है. So this can be the problem. So dihydropyridines can be safely used with beta blockers because beta blocker will suppress the reflex tachycardia. So here is a comparison of amlodipine versus nifedipine. The negative point of nifedipine is bioavailability इसका कम है. Chances of reflex tachycardia are high. Half-life कम है. It can be advantage also. Advantage क्या है कम half-life का? That you can titrate, especially in pre-eclampsia cases. But the dosing इसकी frequent है, whereas amlodipine is given once a day. Less chances of reflex tachycardia are there because of slow onset of action. So that's why amlodipine is preferred for the treatment of hypertension. Whereas verapamil and diltiazem, they are given for arrhythmias and angina only. Okay, we have discussed these points. Peripheral vasodilatation सबसे ज़्यादा nifedipine से है. Coronary vasodilation भी है, but the problem है reflex tachycardia का. Why? Adverse effect profile of these three drugs. So hypotension is mainly seen with dihydropyridines, headaches and peripheral edema is mainly seen with dihydropyridines. Whereas constipation as well as AV blockade, that is mainly seen with non-dihydropyridine drugs. So where we use these drugs for hypertension, Raynaud's phenomena, preeclampsia and coronary spasm. The dihydropyridines are used for this particular group of disorders. Verapamil and diltiazem mainly for angina and arrhythmias. Arrhythmias and angina, we go for the non-dihydropyridine. So what are the advantages of CCBs over other drugs? Other antihypertensives that don't have any adverse effect on the metabolic profile, do not compromise hemodynamics, hardly any sedation is seen, can be given to the patients who have asthma, but where we can't give beta blockers. No male sexual dysfunction is seen, no adverse fetal effects, minimal effect on quality of life. Okay, when we say that do not compromise hemodynamics, no impairment of work capacity, here where we are comparing this antihypertensive group with which group? Okay, Karthik is asking if nifedipine is more efficacious than amlodipine. Look, as far as the vasodilatory property is concerned, yes, nifedipine produces profound vasodilatation, but conversion of this vasodilatation in control of blood pressure clinically is not that much. So we will say they are equally efficacious, but it has got slight edge in cases of preeclampsia because it has short half-life. Okay, Shashwat said the beta blockers do not compromise hemodynamics. Why not alpha blockers? Okay, when we say no sedation or CNS side effect, we are comparing it with which group of drug? Beta blockers, yes, and also centrally acting sympatholitics. Can be given to asthmatics. Again, we are comparing clonidine also. Kshitij has written very right. Okay. RAS modulators, I won't discuss. We already had a lecture on that. So you all know. So just write down the adverse effects of ACE inhibitors. Fatafat likh do. I won't go into ACE inhibitors. In the last lecture, we have already discussed. Adverse effects of ACE inhibitors. Sheetal has written teratogenic. Bache, always remember, even if Viva also, if the teacher asks the adverse effects, you are supposed to tell the most common one first, then comes the other adverse effect. Cough, yes, Sheetal has written right. Dry cough or brassy cough, hypotension, hyperkalemia. Yes, these are the angioedema, also dysgeusia. Shashwat has written right. So, ACE inhibitors, safe in asthmatic diabetic. I think you all know it. I won't waste time. Adverse effects सारे यहाँ आ गए हैं आपके. Contraindication क्या है? Pregnancy and bilateral renal stenosis. Uses you all know it. Okay, lastly, we talk of the vasodilators. Three drugs are there: hydralazine, primary act on the arteries; minoxidil, also primary act on the arteries; sodium nitroprusside act on both veins and arteries. Okay, I think you can read it from the books. में ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है, but important thing about अच्छा minoxidil का off-label use के anyone where nowadays minoxidil is used other than the hypertension and all. It is applied topically. Hair growth, right? Very right. Prakhar has alopecia. Yes. So, yes. Sodium nitroprusside, it is a nitrovasodilator, release nitric oxide, guanylate cyclase. But important point इसके बारे में ये है that जो bottle हम इसका infusion बनाते हैं, it has to be wrapped with opaque paper because exposure to light degrades it. That's the reason sodium nitroprusside bottle, infusion bottle has to be covered with opaque paper. And that it can lead to accumulation of cyanides because of its metabolism. So how we treat cyanide poisoning? You know, these cyanides, they chelates the iron ion of cytochrome oxidase that can lead to tissue anoxia and seizures, ultimately death. So what we do is we give sodium nitrite or amyl nitrate, which convert hemoglobin to methemoglobin, which is further converted into cyanohemoglobin. जो अनस्टेबल मॉलिक्यूल है तो सोडियम थायोसल्फेट देने से वो सोडियम थायोसाइनेट बन जाता है, which is excreted in the urine. You can read it from the book. So these are the hypertension. Okay, lastly, I just want to discuss hypertensive emergency and crisis. What are these and what drugs are given? What is the difference between these two terms? Hypertensive emergency is if the systolic BP is more than or equal to 180, diastolic is more than or equal to 120. But there is no target organ damage. So with target organ damage, so hospitalization is required. Whereas in case of crisis, without target organ damage, the BP is 180, 120. So aggressive treatment is required in both of these conditions. But when we say aggressive treatment, what we mean is that BP has to be reduced over a period of time, not immediately. Otherwise, it can lead to cerebral ischemia. So over a period of time, the BP should be reduced. So what are the various signs and symptoms? It can lead to chest pain, arrhythmias, epistaxis is the most important one, headaches, dyspnea, agitation, anxiety. Important thing is BP should be lowered over a period of 2 hours to not more than 25%. Because rapid lowering can lead to cerebral ischemia, decreased renal and coronary blood flow. So it is to be avoided. So these are the various drugs which are used: nitroprusside, nicardipine, labetalol, anaprilat. आपको याद है जो एक्टिव मेटाबोलाइट था एनाप्रिल का? It is available in the injectable form. Asmolol we can use, loop diuretics, even alpha blocker, depending upon the indication. If the patient has got encephalopathy, then this malignant hypertension, stroke, acute left ventricular failure, तो diuretic का role ज़्यादा आ जाता है. Right, beta blockers if it is aortic dissection, adrenergic crisis, alpha blockers. So depending upon the compelling indication, these drugs are indicated. You can take a snapshot if you want. Okay. Finally, the guidelines, JNC8, what they say about the management of hypertension, that first of all, the first line therapy is ACE inhibitors, ARB, thiazide and CCBs. Then what is the strategy? Strategy is one, to start with one drug, titrate to the maximum dose and then add a second drug. This is one strategy. Second strategy is you start with one drug, then add a second drug before achieving the maximum dose. Third is you start with a big two drugs as separate pills. Initial combination therapy is recommended, but ये तभी करना है आपने if BP is greater than 20 millimeter above your goal BP, then only start with two drugs. Please remember that. Let's say your goal BP is 150 by 90 and the patient comes to you with 180 by 110. So in such a case, you will start with two drugs. लाइफस्टाइल चेंजेस हमने ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर दिए हैं. यू नो इट. अगर एज 60 से ज्यादा है तो गोल बीपी क्या है एंड ऑल दीज थिंग्स. सो इफ the patient falls in non-black category, you can initiate with thiazides or ARBs and ACE inhibitors. Black hai to thiazides or CCBs. Right? If the goal BP is not achieved, you are supposed to reinforce the lifestyle, titrate the medication to maximum dose, or consider adding another medication from a different class, not from the same class. So this is all about the management of hypertension. I hope all is clear. And the Beta blockers, which are mainly being used, are metoprolol, bisoprolol, betaxolol. And for indication like heart failure and hypertension, we can use this. This is all the same. Okay, so that's all. I have got some clinical cases. We don't have the much time. I think we are all exhausted also. We will discuss it next time. Okay, thank you for attending.